welcome to the Awakening Report. I'm your host, Doug Hamp. Pleasure to be with you again. Let's get into your questions right away. But before I do that, I want to remind you that we have a conference coming up July 18th, 19th, and 20th here in Denver, Colorado. It is called One in Messiah Convocation. You can go to oneinmessiahconvocation.com, and there you can learn all about it. We're keeping the price incredibly low, and we want you to come. We've made a little change to it. We were going to include all the meals. We're having to change that a little bit. I do apologize about that. Just some unforeseen circumstances, but we will still make it a lot of fun, and we hope you can come. We're going to have over 20 different speakers. We are going to have workshops and all kinds of fun stuff, and it will be kid friendly. So bring your kids. We'll have activities for them. We'll have tons of activities for the adults, and there'll be a lot of great time of kibbutzing, of fellowship, of talking about the Bible, about different topics. The main topic is really Ezekiel 37 and the two sticks that are coming back together. And so the restoration of those two sticks is the central theme for the conference. And so I just wanted to remind everybody. Also, if you are in the area right now for this Passover, this coming Friday, April 19th, we will be having our Passover celebration at the Way Congregation, and you are invited. We're in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. So if you can come, please join us. If you want to come join us every Shabbat, join us. We're having a great time. And I want to let people know that we have started putting the Way Congregation worship and teaching at the Way Congregation YouTube channel. So check that out. Please subscribe to that, and you can watch the studies there as well. And so I want to give a big shout out to everyone. William says aloha from Hawaii. Hey, William, so glad that you could join us. And let's get into the questions now. We have some great questions. So a lot of fun last time. Guys, I love your questions. I want you to know that I struggled with many of the same questions, and I don't have all the answers, okay? But I have thought through a lot of the questions, and I've been so encouraged by how if we just keep digging into the Word and taking it literally and saying, okay, there has to be an answer to this, then the questions begin to pop out. So let's get to the first question. This is by K9 Centurion Kilo. Question, what is considered leaven from ancient times to what we have in modern times? Could you please clarify, or is there a distinction? Wow, that's a great question. That's really a good question. So the way that the rabbis look at it, and you might say, why are you talking about the rabbis? Well, they have a lot more experience at this than I do. And I'm not saying that they're necessarily absolutely right, but because they have been celebrating the feast for much longer than I have, I'm going to at least consider what their perspective is, because they might have some wisdom that I don't. And so their understanding of what leaven is, this is chametz, okay? So chametz, in their understanding, is anything that makes something rise, okay? So it doesn't only have to be what we would call yeast, but it's any kind of a leavening agent. And so based on that standard or that interpretation, there are many things that would suddenly be out, because if they rise just a little bit, then they would not be considered acceptable. Some types of alcohol, of course, alcohol has a gas, and it's going to make things expand. And so by that perspective, certain things would be out. Now, I myself typically take a more, maybe should we say, liberal understanding of it, and I'm thinking of things that really deal more with yeast. Okay, so definitely breads that have yeast in them; those are obviously out. Okay, now the question about certain wheats, is some wheat in, is some wheat out? So the question of pasta, right? I mean, does pasta really expand? Does it have a leavening agent in it? And I personally see that as a gray area. Now, again, you don't have to take my word for it. I would recommend Chabad.org. There's aish.org as well. Maybe it's aish.com. And you can go to those websites, and you can really consult the rabbis on this. I think they do have a lot of wisdom. There are differences of opinion within the rabbinic circles on this. And so you're going to find that different different communities are going to have a different stance on what you're allowed to eat and what you're not. But the way I see it, and what I really want to do in my heart, is that I'm not trying to score points with God, or that, if I don't do it exactly the way that Rabbi so and so says it, that I'm suddenly going to be out in the streets, theologically speaking, or God doesn't love me anymore. But it's really an object lesson for me. God wants me to clean out my physical house, and I'll tell you that's a very good thing because it forces you to do your spring cleaning. But he also wants us to clean out our spiritual house. And so I think the point here is that it is an object lesson. And so it does require that we use some scrutiny. We go and we look and we dig. And so, whether we can have legumes or not, I'm not always quite certain. I do know that bread is out. Certainly things that wheat and have wheat in and that have a leavening agent, those are obviously out. All right. Other things I see a little bit more as a kind of a gray area. And so just to get back to your question, have things changed? Well, probably. And of course, I'm not an expert in ancient foods, but we can surmise that certain things would have changed over the times. For one thing, sourdough bread, the idea of sourdough bread, that you would take some of that leavening agent and you would add it to the next batch. It just takes a little leaven to leaven the whole lump, right? So you take some of that maybe starter, if you will, and you'd add it to the new batch of dough, and then you would have that would rising as well. So I hope I was able to answer that. That's a great question. I don't have the final thought on that, but I think those at least give you some places to start as you keep looking for them. So Logan asks, please speak about giants and how some mountains are actually petrified giants from the old days. Okay, well, there is a theory that's going around. I've been sent some videos here and there, people suggesting, hey, check this out. And okay, we can go around the earth and we can say, well, look at this mountain. It kind of looks like it was a giant that turned into a mountain. And you can look at it and you say, yeah, okay, I can kind of see that. I'm a little bit skeptical, first of all, because we just cannot prove it until we can actually, excavate these things and actually find bones in there. I'm going to remain skeptical. So I've seen some of the evidence. I find it interesting, but not necessarily completely convincing. And until I can see more evidence, like not just that, hey, this mountain looks like it's a giant, because people have been naming mountains after giants and such for quite a while. Does that mean that it really used to be a giant? Well, not necessarily. It just means that somebody at some time said, hey, this mountain kind of looks like a giant, looked like it's a sleeping giant or something like that. Now, does that mean that it couldn't be? Well, no. Of course, a lot of things could be. But again, I want to see evidence before I go and start, believing and agreeing that such and such really was, in fact, a living giant that, fell down and took a nap and now he turned into a mountain. So, again, if this really is a mountain, some kind of a petrified giant, then we would expect to see. All right, we have to test the theory. We'd expect to see places that really look like eyes and hair and fingers. And if we start digging inside, we should start to find some ossified, um, things are petrified, bones that have turned into rock. We should find their organs that have turned into various things. We should find their stomach, and we should find their last lunch that also petrified. Again, until we can find those kind of things, I'm gonna just remain skeptical on those, even though I think the videos are interesting. But again, I'm not necessarily convinced by those. All right, my friend Ed has a question. As Gentiles, are we grafted into Israel? What happened to Judah after Yeshua? That's a great question, Ed, and of course that is essentially what our conference is all about. So I'll try to do this in a nutshell. I've talked about this before, but what we're talking about are the two houses. Okay, so remember back at Sinai, there was one house, right? There was the house of Jacob. That was 12 different tribes. We had some Egyptians thrown in, right? And this became the united kingdom under Saul. And then, of course, it was the United Kingdom under David and the United Kingdom under Solomon. Now, Solomon did exactly what God told him not to do, which was to multiply wives, to multiply gold and silver, and to multiply horses. Okay, he did all those things that it says very clear in the Torah. A king shall not do these things. Why did God say that? Was it God just trying to be a killjoy? No, he knew that if a king multiplied those three things, horses, because horses are a type of power, they are military power. They show that you have this military might. And so God did not want people to rely upon their military might, but to rely upon Him. He did not want them to multiply their gold and silver, not that He's against wealth. But again, you start trusting in your money instead of trusting in God to provide. Okay, God is not opposed to money, but He is opposed to us trusting in our money, right? The love of money is the root of all evil. And that is indeed what happens. In fact, that's what happened with Solomon. And then, of course, multiplying wives. One wife is a good thing. More than that, it starts to get really sticky. Certainly in Solomon's situation, he had up to 1,000 wives, including his concubines. And that is going to turn his heart from the true God to these other gods. Why? Because it wasn't that he was bringing in all these nice girls from Judah and from the other tribes. Not at all. He was marrying foreign women. And if you love your wife even just a little bit, you're going to want to please her to some extent. And I think we can presume that Solomon loved his wives a little bit, right? And so he would want to please them. And so, where they come from, this is how we do things, right? And she would say, listen, honey, if you love me, why don't you worship the way that we worship back home? And that's what got Solomon in trouble, is that he started worshiping the way they were worshiping back home. And he is actually guilty of setting up high places in the valley of Gehenna. He appears to be the first to ever set up high places in the valley of Gehenna, and they sacrificed there to the god Molech and Chemosh, and those were awful gods. They would take human sacrifices, babies, and they would burn them alive to these gods. And so, bad idea. And so God says, okay, that's it. I'm going to tear the kingdom away from you. I'm going to give it to somebody else. And so he gives it to Jeroboam. Jeroboam becomes the king over the northern tribes, over the 10 tribes in the north, also known as the House of Israel. So now we have the one kingdom turned into two, right? It's this basically a civil war happens, and we have the north and the south. In the north, we have Israel. In the south, we have Judah. And so let's fast forward to 722 BC, and that is when God says, I'm done. I've had it with the house of Israel. They continue to go in a direction that is contrary to what I want them to do, and they continue to murder their children, etc., 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 until finally God says, I am no longer your God. You're no longer my wife. I'm not your husband. You're not my wife. I will not be your God. You're not my people. I will not have mercy upon you anymore. Get out. You're gone. Here's your certificate of divorce. But he never divorced Judah. All right. That's very important. He never divorced Judah. Did Judah deserve to be divorced? Absolutely. She deserved it. How do we know that? Because God says in Jeremiah chapter 3, this is a beautiful passage. He says, they say, this is God speaking, they say, if a man divorces his wife and she goes from him and becomes another man's, may he return to her again. Would not that land be greatly polluted? But you have played the harlot with many lovers, yet return to me, says the Lord. All right, so he's talking here to Judah, and he's saying, look, you've been with many, all right, but come back. And it says in verse 6, the Lord also said to me in the days of Josiah the king, have you seen what backsliding Israel has done? So Josiah is the king in the south. And now this is a reference to what happened in the north. Now, these are in the days, this is happening, of course, obviously, in the days of Jeremiah, which is around 590, somewhere in there, 586 is when Jerusalem fell. So it's sometime before that. There is no more kingdom of Israel. They're gone. They have been displaced. They've been removed, assimilated. Now, some of them did go south. We know that for sure. All right. But there is no more kingdom of Israel. So backsliding, have you seen what backsliding Israel has done? She has gone up on every high mountain and under every green tree, and there played the harlot. And I said, after she had done all these things, return to me. But she did not return. And notice this, and her treacherous sister Judah saw it. All right, so we see that the northern kingdom, Israel, did all kinds of heinous things. She played the harlot under every green tree, God says. And God says, return to me, shuvi alai, right? But she doesn't. She doesn't come back. She doesn't repent. And then Judah in the south says, oh, wow, look what my sister's doing. I think I'll do that. God goes on, and this is Jeremiah 3, verse 8. Then I saw that for all the causes for which backsliding Israel had committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a certificate of divorce. So again, God divorces the northern kingdom, yet her treacherous sister Judah, that's the southern kingdom, did not fear, but went and played the harlot also. So it came to pass through her casual harlotry that she defiled the land and committed adultery with stones and trees. And yet for all this, her treacherous sister Judah has not returned to me, but with her whole heart, but in pretense. Then the Lord said to me, backsliding Israel has shown herself more righteous than treacherous Judah. Wow, what an indictment. So Israel was terrible, but Judah has done the same thing, but has been even worse. It's been even worse. Now, let me just share my screen because I want to let you guys have a look at these verses so that you can see where these ideas are coming from. Again, I don't want to ever be guilty of just making things up, right? All right, so here we are again in Jeremiah chapter 3. And yet for all this, her treacherous sister Judah has not turned to me with her whole heart, but in pretense, and backsliding Israel has shown herself more righteous than treacherous Judah. All right, so then he says, go proclaim these words toward the north. That's to the northern kingdom. Return, backsliding Israel, says the Lord. I will not cause my anger to fall on you, for I am merciful, says the Lord. I will not remain angry forever. Only acknowledge your iniquity, that you have transgressed against the Lord your God and have scattered your charms to alien deities under every green tree, and you have not obeyed my voice. Return, O backsliding children, says the Lord, for I am married to you. I will take you, one from a city and two from a family, and bring you to Zion. And I'll give you shepherds according to my heart, who will feed you with knowledge and understanding. All right, so notice that. Now let's just back up a little bit in time. We're going to go back to Hosea chapter 1. So in Hosea chapter 1, God is speaking to the northern kingdom here. Notice what he says. He says in verse 6, I will no longer have mercy on the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. Yet I will have mercy on the house of Judah. All right, so he will not have mercy on the house of Israel, but he will have mercy on the house of Judah. All right, so this gives us an understanding that these two houses are in big trouble. All right, Judah did not get divorced because God showed mercy because of God's servant King David, and because David was faithful to him, he is going to have mercy on the southern kingdom of Judah. But on the northern kingdom of Judah, it's not that way. He will no longer have mercy in the house of Israel. But then he says, throughout this book, he's going to say, "Come back to me." Yet the number Let me go back. So he says, call his name Lo Ami, for you are not my people. I will not be your God. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people. There it shall be said to them, you are sons of the living God. Then the children of Judah and the children of Israel shall be gathered together and appoint for themselves one head. All right, so Judah was out, but God says he's going to bring, Israel was out, but he's going to bring Israel back together somehow with Judah. This is incredible. Well, we just have to go to the next chapter and we're going to see some very significant language. Now, again, speak to your brethren, my people, and say to your sisters, mercy is shown. Bring charges against your mother, bring charges, for she is not my wife, nor am I her husband. Who is he talking about? The northern kingdom of Israel, which he said that she's not my wife anymore. Okay, so he then goes on and he says, concerning this northern kingdom, it shall be in and it shall be in that day, says the Lord, that you will call me my husband and no longer my master. For I will take from her mouth the names of the Baals, and they shall be remembered by their name no more. And he says, I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and justice and loving kindness and mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord. And it shall come to pass in that day, I will answer, says the Lord, etc. I will sow her for myself in the earth, and I will have mercy on her who had not obtained mercy. Then I'll say to those who are not my people, you are my people, and they shall say, you are my God. Well, who again did he say this to? Well, let's turn very quickly to 1 Peter chapter 2. We'll go here, start at verse 10. He says, you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood. Actually, it's a chosen race. That's the better word there. Holy nation, his own special people, who were once not a people, but now are the people of God, who had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. Again, who did he say this to? We just read it in Hosea. He said it specifically to the northern kingdom, that they were not his people. And now he's bringing these two back together. This is the entire essence of the new covenant. We see this in Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 31, chapter 31. Let me put in 31 there. Okay. This is what the new covenant is all about. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Why? What was wrong with the other one? Was it a bad covenant? No, it was a good covenant. But Israel broke it. Notice what he says. Not according to the covenant I made with their fathers in that day, I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, says the Lord. But this is the covenant that I'll make with the house of Israel. After those days, says the Lord, I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts, and I'll be their God, and they shall be my people. Paul quotes this in Romans chapter 9. And we have just verse after verse after verse. I'm just going to give you guys one more here in Ezekiel chapter 37 to kind of pull this back together. We see here the valley of the dry bones, of course, and then we go to the prophecy of the two sticks. It says, Son of man, take a stick for yourself and write on it for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions. So here you have the two sticks. These are the two sticks that he wants to put back together. And this is exactly what he is claiming that he will do, is put these two back together. Then join them one to another for yourself into one stick, and they will become one in your hand. And when the children of your people speak to you, saying, will you not show us what you mean by these? Thus say to them, thus says the Lord God, surely I'll take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim. Remember, Ephraim is a nickname for the northern kingdom and the tribes of Israel, his companions, and I'll join them with it, with the stick of Judah, that's the southern kingdom, and make them one stick, and they'll be one in my hand. And the sticks on which you will write will be in your hand before their eyes. Say to them, thus says the Lord God, surely I'll take the children of Israel from among the nations. Notice that, among the Gentiles, right? wherever they have gone, and will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land. And I'll make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel. And one king shall be over them all, and they shall no longer be two nations, nor shall they be ever divided into two kingdoms again. All right, so this is the big, exciting story that God has been working on for quite a long time. And I think he's quite excited to share this story with us. So then, again, Ed, let me just wrap this up here. What happened to Judah after Yeshua? That's an amazing question. Okay, so if we're grafted into Israel, what about Judah? Well, this is where I would suggest that the legal paperwork that was necessary to bring these two kingdoms back together was accomplished at the cross. It was accomplished at the cross. All right, so now legally, Judah and Israel can come back together. But we have not seen that in a very practical sense. In fact, we've seen just the opposite. We've seen that they're still at each other's throat. All right, and this, of course, has been prophesied. This prophecy is in Isaiah chapter 11, verse 12, where God says, he will set up a banner for the nations and will assemble the outcasts of Israel, that's the house of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. When is this going to happen? Well, Jesus himself says this very thing in Matthew 24, that he will send out his angels to gather his elect from the four corners of the earth. It's the same language. And notice what follows. It says, also the envy of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not harass Ephraim. All right, so the Jews are still there, right? The Jews are kind of like in the story of the prodigal son. I would suggest that Judah is the brother that stayed home. He's the brother that had a lousy attitude. Said this son of yours, not my brother, but this son of yours. He was out, living this terrible lifestyle of debauchery, and now he's come home and you want to kill the fatted calf? Well, why is that, Dad? I mean, I've been home, and you never said I could do that. And the father says, son, all that I have is yours. And you get this sense that the son that stayed home has this bitter attitude that he's kind of missed the point. He's forgotten about Dad's incredible grace, and he started thinking it was do's and don'ts and various stuff. I don't know. Of course, there's more to that story that could be said, but Judah has just been there, and the goal is to bring us back together. To bring us back together. I think of Joseph and his brothers, and they had no idea who Joseph was. But the Egyptians didn't know who Jesus or who Joseph was either. All they knew about Joseph was that he was a foreigner and he saved us, right? He was able to interpret some dreams, and he had this idea about how to store up grain, and that's what he did. And if it weren't for him, we would all be dead. And so we're very grateful. And it's a very simple kind of appreciation, not really going into too much detail as to who he was. But the brothers knew who Joseph was, but they did not recognize him. And that's what I think we have with the house of Israel, the Gentiles, the Israel who's been scattered into the nations. And now these Gentiles who were coming to Jesus and becoming part of the quote unquote church, and saying, I don't know anything about Jesus being a Jew and all that stuff. I don't know. I don't really care. But I know that he saved me, and I'm grateful for that. And then we have Judah that cannot see who Jesus really is. And they say, he looks very pagan to me. He looks very Egyptian to me. Are you sure we're related? Because that doesn't look like my brother that you claim he is. And one day I think that we're all going to see. This is what Paul says, that blindness in part has happened to Israel, not just to the Jews, but to all Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. The fullness of the Gentiles. That's the expression that that Joseph or Jacob himself used there in Genesis chapter 48, chapter 48. And so I would, what happened to Judah? Judah's still there. And some have already expressed belief and faith in Jesus, and that's awesome. Some have not, and I think I'm gonna have to wait until Jesus comes back, until all of that gets worked out. So, great question. Okay, William asks, are real giants actually coming back? That's a great question, William. And I think the term giants is a little bit misleading. Of course, in English, the word giants means somebody who is of gigantic stature, right? I can't even say it, who's really, really big, okay? Who is bigger, way bigger than the average person. All right, now, is it basketball player size? I mean, they're tall, but are they giants? Is it Andre the Giant? I mean, he was pretty amazing, but he didn't live that long. How big does this giant have to be in order for them to be considered a giant? What I would suggest is that if we go back to the language, we're going to see that the giant, so-called, doesn't necessarily mean that somebody has to be super, super tall. I don't think that's the point. But of course, some of these giants, most of the giants that we see, were in fact very tall. Okay, but I think there's something else that is at play. And if we go back to the word in the Greek, let's start there. The word gigantes is somebody who is gigan. So gigantes is someone who is born of the earth, and they were born of a union between a human and a god. All right, that's according to the Greek mythology. And I turn to the Greek mythology because the word gigantes found its way into the Septuagint around 200 to 270 AD, somewhere, or BC, excuse me. And so these Alexandrian Jews were using that word quite purposefully to describe a being of a mixed heritage, someone who was earth-born and someone who was heavenly, from heaven, okay, the gods, as it were. And so when we understand it in that sense, we're not necessarily looking for somebody who's very, very tall, but somebody who is a hybrid. And I think that helps to clarify things quite a bit. In fact, when we look at the writings of Philo talks about um, the giants as being those who have a dual nature. The book of Enoch says the same thing. And of course, we can go back to the Hebrew in the book of Genesis, chapter 6, where we have the Nephilim. Now, the word Nephilim comes from the word Nafal. Nafal means to fall. So, that's the basic meaning. It is actually in the Nephilim, so it could be someone who causes to fall. All right, or if you topple a tree, we say that you're felling a tree. And so these might be fellers. Okay, these are beings who cause something to fall down. That may be one way to understand that. But the way that we see it being used, I would argue, is that these are hybrid beings. There's something to do with falling, whether they themselves are the ones who are fallen or they're the ones who are causing something to fall. But based on the Greek, I think we have a pretty good help there to understand that these were hybrid beings. So they don't have to be tall necessarily. They might be, but they don't have to necessarily be tall, but they will be of a um, hybrid nature. Should we expect them? I would suggest yes. I would suggest that when Jesus said that as it was in the days of Noah, so the coming of the Son of Man will be, that that is a reference to what was happening back in those days. And then he goes on to say, for they were marrying and being given in marriage, right? So it has to do with the genetics, what was happening in the days of Noah. Well, we see that um, when man began to multiply on the face of the earth, the sons of God took note, right? And they saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, or they were tovot, they were good for something. And they took them as wives, right? I mean, that is a specific reference to marrying. That's where you marry off yourself to somebody, and then the woman is being given in marriage, right? That's the language that is being used. So very interesting. Now, I think it's also again, interesting that when we come to modern genetics, the word genes, right? Genes really just means marriage. All right. The word, it means marriage, and in fact, a gene. There's been some debate about what a gene actually is, but now that we've been able to dig deeper, we understand that inside of a gene, so we have chromosomes. Inside of chromosomes, we have genes, and inside of genes, we have DNA. And we have Watson and Crick, who were the ones who finally decoded the double helix structure of the DNA molecule, and so they helped us understand that. But that it's at its core, it's information. And once we understand that it's information that's being passed on, it's not so much about the fluid. Okay, the fluid is just a means of transferring the data, but it's the data, it's the information that's at the core of that. Now, if you're interested, I wrote a book called Corrupting the Image, and I go into great detail in my book about what is entailed there. Let me see if I can find. Oh, here we go. All right. So here's my book, Corrupting the Image. It is on my website. All right. And just to let you guys know, if you're looking for a way to help support my ministry, I would appreciate that. Okay. I have real costs just like everybody else. And so you can buy a book. All right. It's a great way to help support things. So thank you. But again, Corrupting the Image, you can go to douglashamp.com/store, and I have the book there. So go ahead and check that out. I also put everything on my website. Everything's on my YouTube channel. So if you can't afford it, don't worry about it. Go and just read for free or watch a video, and I have all kinds of cool stuff there. So thank you, William, for that amazing question. All right. I don't know how to say this. NM Sis asks, is the Abrahamic covenant with the nation of Israel or with individual Jews? Okay, that's a very interesting question. All right, I say interesting when I'm looking for the right words to say, right? So, but it is a good question. So the Abrahamic covenant. Let's go back. All right, let's start with this big question: was Abraham a Jew? Now it's interesting that you will get different questions about this. Some would say absolutely yes, and I would argue no, he wasn't. Okay, because a Jew. That's the English word. When we go back to the Hebrew, we see that word comes from Yehuda, or Yehudi is a Yehudi, someone who's from Yehuda, and Yehuda, of course, is the word Judah. That's the fourth son of Jacob, and so Abraham, by definition, cannot be a son of Judah, right? Does that make sense? I hope. So there's just no way. So we can say that Judah came from Abraham, but Abraham did not come from Judah. I think that's basic, physiology and stuff. So hopefully that one is pretty simple. But a lot of people, and Jews included, would say that yes, Abraham was Jewish. And how could you say that he's not Jewish? Well, what I would suggest is that, sure, when we talk about Abraham, we're talking him worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? So in that sense, he has some of the Jewish flavor, certainly. He would have espoused many of the so-called Jewish beliefs, but we cannot actually call him a Jew, right? That would be inaccurate. It would be very inaccurate to actually call him that, because he just simply wasn't. So God did, in fact, establish a covenant with Abraham. He said that he would bless him. And because Abraham was following in the things that God said to do, and Abraham believed by faith, Genesis chapter 15, right? God took him outside and said, look at the stars, so will your descendants be. And Abraham believed. And he believed by faith, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Yay, that's really cool, okay? 2 chapters later, in Genesis chapter 17, God establishes a sign, a symbol for this covenant. He reestablishes the covenant, and then he gives a sign to go with that, which is circumcision. All right. But that's after he had already believed and he'd been declared righteous. And that's much of the argument that Paul is making, is that Abraham was declared righteous before the physical act of circumcision. All right, so that's the Abrahamic covenant. So the Abrahamic covenant was for Abraham and for his entire household. So that means that anybody who wants to be part of this covenant um, can be. And of course, the Jews would be part of the Abrahamic covenant. So it goes Abrahamic covenant up here, and then, the Jews are down here. All right. So we have to kind of keep things straight. So the Abrahamic covenant is indeed with the nation of Israel. Now, by nation of Israel, I'm not sure if you mean the modern state of Israel, or if you're referring to the ancient kingdoms of Israel. So there's a little bit of ambiguity there in your question. But anybody who is Jewish, who claims to follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then yes, they would be part of the Abrahamic covenant. Anybody who is of the nation of Israel, who is following the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, would also be part of that covenant. So, good question. Okay. A dude's thoughts. He says, I don't understand what lust means in the Bible. Is this just dealing with married men? I'm single. If I looked at an attractive woman sexually, am I committing a sin? All right. Well, great question. That's a tricky one. I touched on this last week a little bit, but lust is really when basically I'm coveting. Okay. I'm saying that I want something that I cannot have. It's not rightfully mine to have that thing. All right. Now, God is the one who created us with an attraction to the opposite sex. And that's a good thing, especially in our day when we have men going with men and women going with women. That's not natural. All right. So it is natural for a man to be attracted to a woman and for a woman to be attracted to a man. All right. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when those thoughts go too far, and which often happens in the case of a man, but not always. Okay, where the thoughts become, and I just want to kind of keep this PG, but when those thoughts become more than what is rightfully yours, if you're not married to that woman. Okay, so in the context of a marriage, it's absolutely right and good for a man and a woman to enjoy each other's bodies. That's something that God created. But if you're not married to that person, to then fantasize about a particular person and to say, to have those thoughts, is going too far, because that person does not belong to you, and you do not belong to that person. You're not in a covenant relationship with that person. All right, so you may say, well, but gosh, I get these thoughts. Well, here's what you do. When a kind of a pornographic thought or something comes into your mind, just show it the door. Okay, you're not sinning for just having a flash in your mind. It's when you hold on to that flash and then you start entertaining that flash, and holding on to it and keeping it and saying, oh, I like this. That's when it becomes a sin, is when you hold on to the thought and you keep it and you entertain it. But if it's just a flash going in your mind, then just show that flash the door and say, not going to see you later. Okay. And the more you continue to practice that, the more victory you're going to have, because you're going to just keep practicing right, good thoughts. All right. Now, if you're single, keep looking for a wife, okay? And that's perfectly good. But be careful what you allow into your mind, what you allow your mind to do, because what you will do is that you will actually create neurological pathways. All right. So there's a saying within neuroscience that synapses that fire together wire together. All right. So in our brains, I'm going to talk about this this coming Shabbat. I'm going to talk about neuroplasticity, but this is kind of the big takeaway, is that we have these dendrites, these branches that are going out from these soma cells. All right, the soma cells, I don't know exactly what they do, but they do brain stuff. Okay, and so they have these branches that are coming out, and then we have these synapses. So they're parts of the kind of the string-like things in your brain. They're not actually touching They're not touching, but you can fire them together. Okay, an example would be, your Aunt Susie. She has a very distinctive perfume, and when she came over when you were little, you remember that perfume, right? And then it's 20, 30 years later, and you smell the same perfume, and instantaneously you think of Aunt Susie. Okay, even though she's nowhere to be found, but it's that same scent, because what happened is that when you were little, you had Aunt Susie, and then you had this scent, and when those synapses fired together, they wired together. And what can happen in the case of lust is that we can have um, these thoughts, pornographic thoughts, that are not in the right context, and it can just be any person, and then those things are actually firing together and therefore wiring together. And so what it's going to do is it's going to cause more unrest later on in your life, because let's say when you do get married, you'll still carry those same thoughts, and you might think, well, I'm supposed to be, just for my wife and everything, et cetera, which you should be. But because those neurological pathways have been firing, they're still firing because they're wired together. And so we want to be careful that we really we take our minds captive, that we are practicing healthy living, and that what, as Paul says, that we're going to present our bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And he goes on, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So that's really what we want to do, and there's great reward in that if we will do it. But if we don't, then it'll be, it's difficult now as a single guy. It's going to be difficult when you get married as well. So we got to practice good stuff. All right. Blake says, so baking soda, no pasta. Wow, that seems legalistic. Well, again, Blake, there are different interpretations. This is, of course, regarding, what we can or cannot have during Passover and during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So again, there's different interpretations as to how you should come against this, right? Now, baking soda seems like a pretty simple one to me, because it is definitely an agent that we put into our cookies, etc. And what does it do? It makes them rise. All right. Taking a week off from that seems like a really small deal to me, especially when Jesus was willing to go to the cross to pay for our sins. Can we not just take a week and remember? And not only that, but we are remembering how God took our people, and we become part of this. We're grafted in. We're not taking over. We're not supplanting or replacing or displacing, but we are being grafted in to the nation of Israel. And this is when we remember the amazing thing that God did, that he saved us from slavery, and that our forefathers did not have time for the dough to rise. They had to leave with haste. And so he says, just do this for a week. It has been suggested that there are actual medical benefits to taking time to give your body a week off from any kind of leavening agent. That in itself is a great reason to do it, but that's not really why we do it. But just keep that in mind. The reason I do it is because I just want to enter in, and I believe it's an object lesson, and I know that I could justify this and justify that, and some things I do. I say, I'm like, well, look, I just don't believe that there's anything wrong with corn chips. I just don't believe that there is a leavening agent in my corn tortilla chips. All right. And now that's me. Now, some people might say, oh, you shouldn't do that either. Maybe they're right. Okay. I mean, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm missing the boat on this one, but I'm not convinced currently that, my corn nacho chips that have one ingredient in them, well, I guess two if you count the salt, that those are off limits. Okay. Now, again, I could be wrong, and I'm willing to change if I can be proven wrong. Okay. But according to my current understanding today, I'm going to have, corn tortilla chips. So you're free to do what you want. you really are free to do what you want. It's not about trying to corner you and say you can't do this and you can't do that. You're always free to choose. But if you'll enter in and practice this object lesson, you'll experience a blessing. And I can't really tell you what the blessing is going to be until you do it, because then you'll be able to say, oh, oh, I get it. I see it now. And it was subtle, but it's clear. I understand how keeping that was a blessing. And then when you go back to those things, you'll be like, wow, that wasn't that hard. It was kind of fun to eat matzah for 7 days. It makes me appreciate all the good things that are normally on my plate. And so I really enjoy it. I don't think it's a time to stress, but it's a time to enter in to this incredible object lesson that God has for us. So thank you for the question, Blake. All right, William asks, prior to the fall of Satan, could he have been a seraph? I have read he was most likely in the cherub order, but just wanted your thoughts. Thank you. Okay, well, there's reason in my mind to think that a seraph and a cherub could in fact be the same thing. All right, they could be the same thing. So let me share my screen, and I'm going to take you through and look at a few scriptures that talk about these two different things. Okay, so let me go really quick here. Okay, hopefully everybody can see what I am looking at. I only have one screen. Looks like I'm not. Let me try that again. All right, let's see. Let's go back here and we will share. Looks like it's not coming through. Well, all right. I'm sorry. Seems like my share screen is not working. But if you want to follow along in your Bibles, that's how we used to do it in the old days, right? Get out your Bibles. All right. So let's go to Isaiah chapter 6. In Isaiah chapter 6, in the year that King Uzziah died, uh, Isaiah sees this incredible thing. I saw the Lord sitting on the throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. Okay, so he's seeing these beings. They're called seraphim. Now, a seraph means to burn. These are burning ones. All right, so these are burning kind of creatures. All right, they're burning creatures. Let's go now to Revelation 4:8. In Revelation 4:8, we see the 4 living creatures, each having 6 wings, were full of eyes around and within, and they do not rest day or night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. Now, these creatures that are clearly called they're called the 4 living creatures. They have 6 wings, and they say, Holy, 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 right? Now, in Isaiah chapter 6, that's what they say. Holy, holy, holy. They have 6 wings. But notice that these creatures, their description in verse 7, this is Revelation 4:7. The first living creature was like a lion, the second living creature like a calf, the third living creature had a face like a man, and the fourth living creature was like a flying eagle. Where else do we find these creatures? Not only that, but it says these living creatures were full of eyes in front and in back. Well, if we go to Ezekiel chapter 1, we see some very, very similar creatures. All right. And in Ezekiel chapter 1, they are called cherubim or cherubim. All right, so these cherubim in Ezekiel chapter 1, we're going to start at verse 4. Then behold, I looked, and behold, a whirlwind was coming out of the north, a great cloud with raging fire engulfing itself, and brightness was all around it, radiating out of its midst, like the color of amber out of the midst of the fire. So that's our first clue, is that there's fire. Remember, the word seraph means fire. And this is also from within. In it came the likeness of 4 living creatures. They are the 4 living creatures that we saw in Revelation chapter 4, who said, Holy, 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 just like we saw in Isaiah chapter 6. And so the four living creatures are described as one had the likeness of a man, or they had the likeness of a man. Each one had four faces, and each one had four wings. So now they have four faces, but here they have four wings instead of six wings. So that definitely throws somewhat of a monkey wrench in the theory. But uh, it says their legs were straight, like the soles of their feet were like the soles of calves' feet. They sparkled like the color of burnished bronze. The hands of a man were under their wings on their four sides, and each of the four had faces and wings. Their wings did not touch one another, they did not turn, etc. As for the likeness of their faces, each had the face of a man. Each of the four had the face of a lion on the right side. Each of the four had the face of an ox on the left side. And each of the four had the face of an eagle. Thus were their faces, their wings stretched upward. Uh, two wings of each one touched one another, and the two covered their bodies. So that is, of course, here our challenge. They have the same description as the creatures in Revelation chapter 4, right? So a lion, a calf, a man, and an eagle, those are the exact same faces. In Revelation 4, they say, Kadosh, 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 right? Holy, holy, holy. But that's what they said in Isaiah chapter 6. And yet, the difference between these seems to be the number of wings that they have. That has caused me to speculate maybe they actually maybe the ones with the four wings actually have six wings, but for some reason they're not mentioned. I don't know, and I really can't answer it, but I'm suspicious. I'm very suspicious that the seraphim and the cherubim are actually the same creature. The only thing I cannot figure out is the number of wings. Maybe they're otherwise completely identical, perhaps, and the cherubim have four wings and the seraphim have six wings. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. I have not been able to get a look on that side of heaven and take a look at that. But from the evidence that I see that they're practically the same. They're like 99.9% the same. And it's just the number of wings between these two different passages that's make me say, I don't know. Maybe there's something there, and I can't quite figure that out. It's got me stumped, but that's as far as I've gotten with that. So, could Satan have been a seraph? I would suggest yes. I think it's possible that he may have been a seraph. And maybe the seraphim and the cherubim are different orders, but they're practically the same. Maybe that's the case as well. All right, so Gary Wooden asks, it seems physical reality is mathematically based. Is it possible that the creation is a digital simulation? Oh, that's a fun one. Well, the idea that everything is a digital simulation has become much more popular in recent days. Now, can I tell you if it's a digital simulation? Well, I don't know. Maybe, right? But the interesting thing about a digital simulation is it means that somebody had to create the simulation, right? Somebody had to create the video game that we are supposedly living in. Who would be the creator of this virtual world, this digital video game that we are living in? Well, that would mean there has to be a creator. Well, that seems pretty obvious to those of us who believe in the Bible, because the Bible tells us that God created all there is. And so certainly that would make a lot of sense. But physical reality is mathematically based. Again, I'm not surprised by this because I believe that there is a creator, and the creator, based on laws, some of which we don't understand, some we may never understand, but some we're actually discovering and we're like, wow, that is really cool. And those kind of laws are the things that physicists and astrobiologists, astrophysicists, quantum physicists, you name it, are discovering the mathematics that lies behind the world that lies before us. We look to smaller and smaller and smaller things, and we discover that there's mathematics behind those. I don't think the mathematics necessarily proves that it has to be a digital simulation, but it does prove that there's order. There's tremendous order out there. And it's really astounding that we can presumably continue to look out with our telescopes and never get to the end. We keep looking at bigger and bigger and bigger things, but we can also go down deep and look in ever more inwardly. We can look inside and see even smaller stuff. So fascinating stuff. I get really excited about this. Trying to think of the name of a guy who is a mathematician. He suggested that he found a code in the physical reality, and I cannot remember his name. I can only remember Neil deGrasse Tyson was interviewing this guy, and sadly I can't remember his name, but he was suggesting that we are in fact living in a digital simulation. There's another physicist. Let's see if I can pull his name. I was just looking at it the other day. Boy, I want to say Tudor, but yeah, there was another. There's another guy, okay, who was also saying that he thinks that we're living in a digital simulation, and so maybe just Google it. Who are these physicists that suggest we're living in a digital simulation? Again, very interesting stuff, but what I find shocking is that they can come to these pretty imaginative suggestions and yet not go to the next obvious conclusion that there must be a creator, right? And so that's what I find really most exciting about all of the math and physics that's being done, is that it proves that there has to be a creator. Great question. All right. Ryan asked, do you believe in a 6-day creation? Yes, Ryan, I do. I wrote a book called The First 6 Days. I published that in 2007. It's been a while. So I published that in 2007. The First 6 Days, you can get it on Amazon or in my store, douglashamp.com/store. The First 6 Days. And I argue that God created in 6 literal days. I base that on the linguistic evidence of the word yom, that the word day in Hebrew always refers to a literal revolution of the earth around its axis. All right. And now, in most cases, that is in fact a 24-hour period. We have maybe a couple exceptions when Joshua had his long day. So that clearly was not a regular 24-hour day. We have the thing with Hezekiah, and the sundial went back. Was it 10 degrees or 15 degrees? And so obviously something interesting happened there. So those were, 2 clear exceptions. And then we have in Habakkuk chapter 3 a reference to how the earth is going to stand still for a bit, probably because God is going to be fighting against hybrid creatures at that point. And so other than those 3 examples, every other day was a literal 24-hour day as far as I can see. Now, again, I find it very interesting that what science is uncovering is that there was a beginning to the universe. This is called the Big Bang. And as Christians, it's not something that we should fear, but it's something we should try to understand. All right? It doesn't mean that I agree necessarily with all their numbers, but they actually did find, and they proved that there had to be a beginning to the universe before the discovery of the so-called Big Bang. Many scientists believed, so we're talking like pre-Einstein, they believed that the universe was eternal. It was called a static universe, and it had always existed. There was no beginning to the universe. And then Edwin Hubble is looking through his telescope. He's seeing that light is having this red shift, which means that it's moving away. And it's like the Doppler effect, that when you hear an ambulance coming at you, you hear the woo, and then it goes past you, and go woo, right? That's called the Doppler effect. We have the same principle that happens with light, that as it gets pushed toward us, it shifts blue. When it's being pulled away from us, it's shifted red. And so he simply said, okay, if it's moving away from me, that means that, years ago, it must have been expanding. And so taking that evidence, um, after that, they theorized, okay, there had to be a beginning to the universe. It's pretty exciting stuff. Now, there's also a theory that goes along with that I find very encouraging, and that's called the cosmic inflation. And it is the principle that the universe is expanding, and it did expand and it is still currently expanding, but initially it expanded at an incredibly fast rate, many, many, many times faster than the speed of light. Now, what I find exciting about that, and keep in mind that even with just your basic cosmic expansion, that scientists believe that the universe is expanding at a rate faster than the speed of light. Okay, so let's think about this for a moment. What that would suggest is that the light, the furthest that we can grasp, which is about 15 billion light years away, in order for that light to travel from there to here would take 15 billion light years, 15 billion years, right? It's traveling at the speed of light. But that doesn't mean that it took 15 billion years for the light and those universe or those galaxies and the star clusters to get out there. Why? Because the universe itself is expanding. That's what's so amazing. And it's expanding at a rate faster than the speed of light. And so what that means, that coupled with the super fast cosmic inflation that happened when the universe was very young, that it happened at magnitudes faster than the speed of light, that it wouldn't actually take billions of years for this universe to come around. That's what's so amazing. But looking at it with our current clocks and what we think we know about it, then sure, we would make these assumptions that everything would take, millions and billions of years for all this to happen. But with cosmic expansion and cosmic inflation, it could have happened at a much, much, much faster rate, and the light could still get out there, which today, to travel even at the speed of light, would take 15 billion light years to get there. So pretty cool stuff when we start looking at it. And I actually think that if we could just marry these two, I wish I had time to put this into another book, but if we could marry these two ideas, I think that we would see that there is no discrepancy between the chronologies that are given in the Bible and the best astrophysics that we know about today. So, great question. Michael asked, Doug, thank you. I think I'm awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. From the days of watching your Bible studies home in California to be with us in Mile High City, we should appreciate your work. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Not a question, but I do appreciate that. All right, a question. This is from Micah Gross. Do you think that our fall from grace has affected more than just the human race, that is, animals? Are their days numbered because of us, etc.? Yes. In an answer, one word answer, yes. The animals definitely suffered as a result of Adam's sin. Let's go back for a moment. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 1. So we have in Genesis chapter 1, God says in verse 24, then God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind. So where do these come from? From the earth. All right. They came out of the earth. Cattle and creeping thing, beasts of the earth according to its kind. And God made the beast of the earth according to its kind, etc., etc. All right. And then God said, let us make man in our image. Now, here he's quite pithy about what he says concerning man. But in chapter 2, we're given a much more detailed look at the creation of Adam and Eve. And so it says in Genesis 2:7, and the Lord formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. So what we see then is that God created, he said to the earth, let the earth bring forth the living creatures, and these animals came out of it. They came where? Out of the dust of the ground. They came out of the same substance that Adam was made of, right? God took that same substance, dirt, dust, and he fashioned Adam, he breathed into him, and he became a living being, okay? Le nefesh chaya, same word for animal. Interesting. It's very interesting that it's the exact same word, but God made Adam the master of all the animals. He says that in Genesis chapter 1. He says, see, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be food. Except, let me go back one verse, sorry, verse 28. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. All right, so Adam was given dominion over everything. We also see that in Psalm chapter 8. So the dirt, the soil is called Adamah. All right, we know it collectively as the Eretz. So he makes the animals out of the Adamah. He makes Adam out of the Adamah. Let's switch the word Adamah for Legos. All right. So God makes Lego Planet. All right, and then he takes some of those Legos and he forms them into animals. All right, and then he takes some more of those Legos and he forms man. And then he breathes in life into this Lego man, and he tells Lego man, "You're now responsible for everything. You're to subdue it. You have dominion over it." Now, when Adam sinned, when he brought death and decay into his own substance, dirt, guess what? That substance then went into the rest of the creatures. It went into the very dirt itself. It went into the very dust, the substance. And because the animals were brought out of that same substance, they suffered the same fate that Adam suffered, right? So we have in Genesis chapter 3, God says to Adam, he says, because you have heeded the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying you shall not eat it, cursed is the ground for your sake. All right, so there's a question. Did God curse the earth, or was he actually declaring what had just happened? I would suggest the latter, that God was not so much, saying, okay, poof, you're now the earth is cursed, right? And I'm the one cursing it, but I would suggest that God is declaring what happened. Okay, it's not that God is doing, but God is declaring what happened. And now he's saying, hey, by the way, Adam, sorry, but the earth is now cursed. All right. So because it's ahu, it is cursed as a result of what you did. You were the one who cursed it. And now I'm just telling you, I'm the messenger that cursed is the ground because of you, for your sake, because of you. And now you're going to have to toil from it all the days of your life. And the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Now let's cruise over to the New Testament. This is in Romans chapter 8, verse 19. So here Paul says, for the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, because the creation itself will also be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs together until now. Not only that, but we also who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. All right, so you put all those together, and what do you get? We get a picture that suggests that when Adam, the Adam from the Adamah, when he, as the federal head of creation, when he sinned, when he experienced death, decay, degeneration, that death, decay, and degeneration then spread from him to the like substance, Adamah, all right, the earth, the dirt, the soil, where Paul tells us that the very creation itself is groaning, waiting to be liberated from the bondage of corruption. Well, guess what? The animals also come from the Adamah, and they also are waiting to be delivered from that. And that's why it's going to be so amazing when we get to the age to come, that the animals are going to lie down with one another, and they're not going to try to eat each other. The little child is going to play by the viper's den and is going to lead the lions, etc. Because their curse, the curse that Adam brought upon them, that same curse has been lifted from the entire planet. So, great question. That was a really fun one. Okay. Question: is the bride the New Jerusalem? Thank you, James. All right. I'm gonna have to get into my answering chair because this one's it has a lot of moving parts. But let's go to Revelation chapter 21. In Revelation chapter 21, we have a description of the New Jerusalem, and we have some things that are said about this New Jerusalem. So John says, "Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband." Well, there you go, right? The New Jerusalem is the bride. So, yes, okay. But is it that simple? Well, probably not. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, "Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God." That's kind of a little nuance look into what we saw there in Hosea chapters 1 and 2, where God said, "They're not my people, but now they are my people," right? So we can see that there. And so, is she or is she not? Well, indeed she is. Let's skip down now to verse 9. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls filled with the last seven plagues came to me and talked with me, saying, "Come, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife." And he carried me away in the spirit, into a great and high mountain. And he showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. Her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal, etc. Okay, so yes, the New Jerusalem is the bride, but we need to understand something. Let's think about a city for just a moment. Let's take New York City, okay? City everybody knows. What is New York City? Is New York City a place on the map? Yes, it is. Okay, you can travel to that place. You can go to New York City. But when you get to New York City, what do you see there? Well, you see land, right? You see dirt, you see roads, you see buildings, you see bridges, infrastructure. Is that New York City? Yes, it is, right? That is New York City. But is that the entirety of New York City? Well, no, because we often say that, well, New York City has just passed a law. Is it the buildings that are passing laws? Is it the bridges that are making decisions? No, of course not. Where did all those bridges and such come from? From the people, right? So there's three things that every city is comprised of: a physical location, some kind of infrastructure. It may be very simple, but there's still some infrastructure to it. Some kind of buildings, maybe bridges or something. Something is there. Maybe just a wall. Maybe it's just four rocks demarcating this is our place. Okay, it's not a very impressive city, but it could be a city, I suppose. But most cities have some kind of infrastructure, and then something that every city has to have to really be a city. Otherwise, we call it a ghost town. What does it need? It needs people. So in this city known as New Jerusalem, there's one very, very important part. And that important part is the people that occupy the city. All right. And it's the people, not just the structure, not just the place, but it's the people that really make it home, right? You can go to a building and you may not be able to call that home because there's nobody living there. It's just a place. But when there's people there, well, now it's a home. And now it can really be considered a bride. So it is all three of those things that make it a city. Because notice what is actually written on the city itself. Verse 12, also she had a great and high wall with 12 gates, 12, important number, and 12 angels at the gates, and names written on them, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. Wow, that's really important, right? So there we have these 12 tribes that cannot be um, divorced from the city. We see this also in Ezekiel chapter 48, and I would suggest that these are in fact the same city. I won't go into all the details now, but I'm going to make that assertion for now. And it says these are the exits of the city. This is in Ezekiel 48, verse 30. On the north side, measuring 4,500 cubits, the gates of the city shall be named after the tribes of Israel. The three gates northward, one for Reuben, one gate for Judah, and one gate for Levi. And you get the idea. It goes all the way around the city. And it says, all the way around there shall be 18,000 cubits. And the name of the city from that day shall be, what's the name of it? The Lord is there. In Hebrew, Yehovah Shammah, right? This is the Lord's city, right? He's married to this city. And who occupies it? The 12 tribes of Israel. Sure, it's on the foundations of the apostles, no question about that. But the gates, the people going into it, each tribe has a gate. That's not just an afterthought or kind of a nice little touch or a historical reference to what used to be. No, this is present day reality, what he's getting at there. So it is both. And so important that we saw that God said, you are no longer my people, but it will be said to them in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people. It shall be said to them, you are sons of the living God. Wow. And what does God say in Hosea chapter 2? You know, she's not my wife. I'm going to betroth you to me. You're going to be my bride. To betroth someone means that that person, that woman, is now your bride. This is it. The New Jerusalem, that yes, is a physical place, yes, has physical structures, or maybe they're made of spiritual bricks, but they're still real bricks or whatever they are. It's real tangible stuff. But it's the people that dwell in that city that make it home, that make it a real bride. And that bride is, in fact, Israel. So to answer your question, it's going to be all three, but it has to be the people. And as much as it is a place and it is infrastructure, but it's also the people. All right. Thank you, James. That was a fun question. All right. Sean Torre asked, when was hell created after Satan was kicked out of heaven? Another good question. I'm trying to think how to answer that quickly. Not always easy to answer these questions quickly, but I will again do my best for you guys. I'm going to try to share my screen one more time. I think it's always so beneficial. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Looks like it's going to work this time. Fantastic. All right. So let's start looking at some of the passages that speak about this place that we know or we commonly refer to as hell. Let's start in Mark chapter 9. All right. We're going to start with the sayings of Jesus. All right. I think it's always a good place to start with Jesus, because then we can work our way backwards until we get to kind of an understanding. Okay, so Jesus says in Mark 9:42, whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter into life maimed rather than having two hands to go to hell, into the fire that shall never be quenched, where, notice here's a quote, their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. And if your foot causes you to sin, and he says the same thing, and he quotes again from that same place, where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. All right, and he says it again, and he quotes again, where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. Now, the word for hell, what is that word? Let's take a look at that in the Greek so that we can have a sense of what that word is. All right, so here's our English word hell. Here's our Greek word ge'enan. All right, Ge'enan is coming from Gehenna, all right, which comes from the Ben Ge Hinnom, Ben Ben Gay, Gay Ben Hinnom, excuse me, Gay Ben Hinnom. The word Gay in Hebrew is valley. Ben means son, and Hinnom is a name. And so this is a place that became known as Gehenna. And in that place, we see in Jeremiah 7:31, we see this, and they have built the high places of Tophet. Um, Sorry about that. Let me just go back there, and I'm just wanting to put that into Hebrew for you, so we can take a look at that. And they've built the high places of Tophet, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom. All right, so here we have it. Begay Ben Hinnom. All right, so Gay Ben Hinnom. This is where this comes from. And this is also known as Tophet. Tophet, keep that in mind, kind of bookmark the word Tophet from just really quick. And what were they doing there? They're burning their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I did not command, nor did it come into my heart. This is what they were doing there. They're doing these terrible, terrible things. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when it will no longer be called Tophet, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, Gay Ben Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. For they will bury in Tophet until there is no room. Wow. All right. So there's a lot to unpack here. Let's now go to Isaiah chapter 30, 30, 30, okay, verse 31. And we have this verse 33. All right. The context here is that God is giving a prediction, a declaration over what is going to happen to a certain king. I would argue, I don't have time to go into all the detail, but I would argue that this king is in fact the same king who is over Babylon. That same king is in fact Satan, all right, for lack of a better word. And so here comes the Lord burning with his anger, and his burden is heavy. His lips are full of indignation, his tongue like a devouring fire. All right, so this is a general description of what it looks like when Jesus comes back. His breath is like an overflowing stream, which reaches up to the neck to sift the nations with the sieve of futility, etc. And so then the Lord will come. He show the descent of his arm with the indignation of his anger and the flame of a devouring fire. This is an amazing description of when Jesus comes back. And it says here, he's going to beat down through the voice of the Lord, Assyria will be beaten down, and as he strikes with the rod. And then we finally come to verse 33. For Tophet was established of old. So we saw that Tophet and Gehenna are the same place, right? We saw that Gehenna and Tophet are the same place. That was in Jeremiah 7:31. So for Tophet was established of old. Now wait a second. Tophet was established of old. Now we're only in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah is writing somewhere between 750 to roughly 710, somewhere in there. And Tophet was established of old. Now that's interesting. Okay, so what does that mean exactly? I would suggest that this is much more than just a couple hundred years. This is something much, much older. And he goes on to say, yes, for the king, it is prepared. Well, what's prepared? Tophet, this place of slaughter, this place also known as Gehenna, was prepared for the king, and it's prepared. He has made it deep and large. Its pyre is fire with much wood. The breath of the Lord, like a stream of brimstone, kindles it. So this place is very similar to, or I should say it's not similar to, but what is kindling this place? Where is this fire coming from? It's coming from the breath of the Lord, like a stream of brimstone is what is lighting it up. Well, where do we see this? We see this in Daniel chapter 7. It says, Daniel sees this incredible description of the Ancient of Days. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking, probably a reference to the Antichrist. I watched till the beast was slain and its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. That's exactly what is going to happen in Revelation chapter 19. We see this. The beast was captured, and these two were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. That's the same place, all right? And what is this place that we're talking about? It's this place known as Gehenna. It's known as Tophet. It was prepared for Satan and his angels. I'm going to cruise over to Matthew chapter 25 really quick here. Actually, I forget it's, let's see here. So when the Son of Man returns, we're going to see when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory, and he's going to separate the sheep from the goats, right? We know what happens to the sheep. They get to come on in. Why, Lord? Because when I was hungry, you helped me, etc. And then he says to those on the left hand, depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire, prepared for who? The devil and his angels. So I would suggest that the king that was prepared for the king, that Tophet was prepared for the king that we saw in Isaiah chapter 30, verse 33, is a reference to the devil, to Satan, you know, whatever other name you want to think of him for him, but let's call him the devil or Satan. That place was prepared for him. Now, all right, bookmark this. Okay, there's a lot to this, so it's not one of those simple doctrines that we can just quickly look at and be done with it. But we have to take a look at all the different pieces to understand the context of what Jesus was saying in Mark chapter 9. So in Isaiah 66, verse 23, and it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me, says the Lord. Notice here, and they shall go forth and look upon the corpses of the men who have transgressed against me, for their worm does not die, and their fire is not quenched. They shall be an abhorrence to all flesh. Wow. All right, so here we have the word piglim or pigrei hanashim, and this word here, as we can take a look, all right, pege is a corpse, a carcass, a monument, a stela, the corpse of a man. So a corpse, a carcass, this thing is dead, all right? So these bodies here are not living people, they're dead people, like dead with no life in them, all right? And these corpses of the men who've transgressed against me, and it's the worm that does not die, and the fire is not quenched. But we're not told that they are conscious. We're not told that they are in agony, that they're being burned continually, but just that their corpses are there. And it's, of course, it's not a very nice experience, but there's no conscious spirit within these people. So the question again concerning Satan, hell, when was this established? Was hell created after Satan was kicked out of heaven? Yes, I would suggest that was the case. That essentially what happened to Satan is that he was either a keruv, as one of the keruvim, the cherubim, or he was a seraph, or maybe both, as we kind of speculated here. But he had fire in him, and that fire was taken away. We already looked at, in this segment, we looked at Ezekiel chapter 1, and we saw that these keruvim, that they're fiery, right? They have this fire in and around them, and this fire was taken out. We see that in Ezekiel chapter 28. So in Ezekiel chapter 28, God says, you are the anointed cherub who covers. You walked on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. So there's some kind of fire that is associated with Satan. This is before he falls. You were perfect in all the ways from the day you were created till iniquity was found in you. And then he says, that by the abundance of your, I would say, slandering, the text says trading, but that's another discussion, you became filled with violence within and you sinned. Therefore, I cast you as a profane thing out of the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the fiery stones. The fiery stone seems to be a reference to the cherubim described in Ezekiel chapter 1. And he says, your heart was lifted up because of your beauty, you corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I cast you to the ground and laid you before kings that they might gaze at you. And notice here in verse 18, you defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities. Therefore I brought fire from your midst. It devoured you. I turned you to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all who saw you. So he took the fire that was part of Satan's makeup and he took it out. He took it out. So now Satan and fire don't seem to mix too well. But when he first created him, fire was part of his makeup. In other words, he could be in God's presence because we're told that God is a consuming fire. And to be in his presence is to be in his fire. How do we know this? Well, let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And Paul tells us, now if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, and straw, each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire. So when we stand in God's presence, we're going to be standing in his fire, and the fire will test each one's work of what sort it is. So we will be there too, right? If anyone's work which he's built on it endures, he'll receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved. Yet so as through fire. We're going to be in God's fire. It's really that simple. We are going to be in God's fire. We're told that the angels are ministering spirits of fire. We're told that God is a spirit of fire. And I take that very literally, that there really is fire coming out from God. And so to be in his presence in a fallen state means that you do not have your fire suit on. You do not have a body that is compatible with fire. And Satan is currently not compatible with fire. So God then created this place called Tophet, or uh, uh, Gehenna, and that is Satan's ultimate destination. And it will not bode well for him because he does not mix with fire like he used to. So God created that place after he fell, not before. He did that as a response to Satan's fall, not not before. And we saw that in Isaiah chapter 30, that it was prepared for the king from the days of old. It was prepared for Satan. Okay, let's keep on going. Okay, let's see. All right. Logan asked, 2026, the date of the rapture, question mark. What's your take on this? Well, Logan, you know, so I used to be pre-trib. Okay, I just want to make that a full disclosure. I used to be pre-trib. And so that would sound exciting, maybe 2026. Is it possible? Hey, a lot of things are possible. Do I think it's very likely now? I don't think it's very likely. I just don't see that date happening that quickly. I just don't. Now, I'd be happy to be wrong. I think I would anyway, but it's really hard to say. When I kind of start thinking of some dates that start to ring in my ears quite nicely, I mean, 2028, it seems like it at least fulfills the 70 or 80 years from 1948 when the modern state of Israel was reestablished. So that's at least maybe a possibility. Again, I could be completely wrong about that. The other one that jumps out at me is if we assume that a generation is 100 years old, and if, big if the re-establishment of the nation of Israel is significant, which I believe it is, which happened in 1948, and then we take 100 years from that time, and the generation that sees these things will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Jesus said, Matthew 24. So if we take a generation, which is the lifetime of a person, to be 100 years, we get the term 100 years from Genesis chapter 15, where God says, "Know for certain that your descendants will be slaves for 400 years, but in the fourth generation, I will take them out. So that means 400 divided by 4 is 100 years. And so we then basically have what looks like a 100-year generation. Again, these are question marks. Okay, we don't know. But again, speculating a little bit, from 1948 to 2048 is 100 years. And then if that is the return of Jesus, and then we have to subtract 3.5 years for the beginning of the Great Tribulation, that means it would happen. Well, let's think about it. I would suggest that Jesus will probably return at the time of the fall feast. All right, so that means it would be in the fall of 2048. Let's say October, just for simplicity. If we then back up and we go back 3.5 years, that would put us in the spring of 2045. I think that's pretty interesting because in 2045, if let's make an assumption really quick, that that's when the Antichrist goes into the temple and declares himself to be God, showing himself that he is God. According to transhumanism, this is guys like Ray Kurzweil and many others, Nick Bostrom. In fact, Nick Bostrom was the guy who suggests that we're living in a simulation, I believe it was. So if that is correct, and if the transhumanists are correct, and again, these are pretty intelligent people, they're pretty smart. Ray Kurzweil, very intelligent man. If they're correct that the singularity when humanity is no longer transhumanism, no longer transhuman, we're not just post-human, but we're actually meta-human. We now have transcended completely our humanity, and we become humanity 2.0. All right, we've essentially become one with the universe. We become gods. They're making the date 2045, not me. So that seems like a very interesting date in light of our speculated date of 2048. So again, speculation. All right, so don't say that Doug said this. I'm just speculating. But if 2048 were the time that he would come back, that would put it right in line with what the transhumanists are suggesting by 2045. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But that would not surprise me. Let's just put it that way. That would not surprise me if, in fact, that's the date. When I was a pre-tribber, I used to think it'd be a lot sooner. I was hoping for sure. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, Jesus knows when he's coming back, or at least the Father does. I certainly don't. And so I'm just throwing out some speculation in there for us to kind of chew on. Okay, so here we go. We have another, let's see. We have another question. This is by T. Kinksy1. Question, Daniel 9:27, usually translated as for a week. Could it be translated in the week, denoting when not for the term? I'm not quite sure I'm following there. But in Daniel 9:27, it says, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. On the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. All right, great question. So, so he's gonna strengthen. He's gonna confirm, strengthen. A brit. A brit is a covenant, a contract. La rabim. All right. La rabim. Now, the word rabim is the same word that Jesus used when he said that he came to give his life as a ransom for many. Kind of interesting there. And it says shavua echad. All right. So shavua echad. Shavua definitely means a week. There's no question about that. A shavua. And it's one. So it's 1 week. Now, let's go back a little bit to understand what these weeks are. Are we talking about 7 days? Is that what we're to understand? Or is there something else? All right, so we go back into verse 24, the same chapter, Daniel 9:24. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, etc. So here we have the word shavuim, shivim. Okay, so shavuim, of course, is 70, and then the word shivim is the word for weeks. But we would normally see the word shavuot. So the word shavuot means weeks, like a week of days. So what we glean from this is that the word shivim is not technically speaking of 7 literal days, but it's speaking of a 7 something. The word for that in Greek is a heptad. A word in English that is similar would be the word dozen. Now, when I say a dozen, I think of eggs, right? A dozen eggs, right? But of course, a dozen doesn't have to be eggs. It could be a dozen anything. But we often think of a dozen eggs because they come packaged that way, etc. And so we're often thinking that way. But so here we have the word shivim, and we think of a week because a week has 7 somethings, right? 7 days in it. But here this is the shivim. So there are 70 sevens that are determined. So there's 70 units of 7 that are determined for your people and for your holy city. All right, so that's a really important clue. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks or seven units of sevens and 62 units of sevens. All right, that's another way to look at it. So that'd be 69 units of 7. And after the second group of 62 sevens, Messiah shall be cut off. So we scholars have basically pegged this to be, I think it's 432 AD. I think I might be off by a year or two, but that is essentially the year that the command was given to rebuild Jerusalem, and then we go from there until Messiah himself was cut off. A lot of the work on this was done by it's escaping me. Sir Robert Anderson. There we go, Sir Robert Anderson, and he did some excellent work on this, and so I'm referring to his work, and that gives us a time when Messiah was cut off, but not for himself. All right. So then the people of the prince who is to come, that the people of the prince who is to come. So as the logic goes, the people of this prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Who were the people that came and destroyed the city and the sanctuary? That would be the Romans, or let's call it the Roman Empire. Okay. So there's a lot of people there. And then the prince will come out of this basic group. All right. So it doesn't mean he has to be necessarily Roman or Italian, but he has to be somewhere within the Roman Empire. So that means that he could come out of Egypt, for example. He could come out of North Africa. He could come out of Turkey. He could come out of Rome. That's certainly a possibility. Could come out of Spain, possibly England. There's lots of places that this person would come from, but that would suggest that he probably will not come from mainland China. All right, so that's something to think about. And then this individual is going to confirm and make strong a covenant, a contract with many for 1/7. All right, so again, the word is shavua. We don't have it now in the plural, so it's a little bit harder to see. But presumably, because it's the same type of language that's being used through this chapter, it's still a unit of a 7. So because the others were referring to units of 7 years, I think it's very logical to suggest that this is still speaking about the unit of 7 years versus 7 days. So to get really into the heart of your question is instead of for a week, could it be translated in the week? So vachetzi hashavua. So and half of the week. That's all it says. And half of the week. So half of this 7. We really don't have a preposition. It doesn't tell us, for or in. If that were the case, then we would expect the preposition le or the preposition be, but we don't see those. We say vachetzi hashavua, yashbit zevach umincha. So we just don't have that. So I cannot really answer that. I hope I was able to help explain a little bit about some of the other things that are happening in this passage, but the actual language doesn't tell us because there's no preposition to give us any more clues, which is such a bummer. All right, so here's a question. And the question, which just ran away, was, sorry about that, guys. I hit the wrong button and then it went away. But basically, it was about the Noahide laws. Okay, Doug, what do you think about the Noahide laws? Are they good? Do you support them? Well, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the Noahide laws. I know that there is a push lately by some Torah teachers and others who are suggesting that these Noahide laws are bad. But really, the Noahide laws are simply inferences that rabbis have made based on Genesis chapter 9, where God says that that man's blood shall not be shed, and if it is, then that man shall be killed. All right, so he says, starting in verse 4, he says, but you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is its blood. All right, so that's one thing, don't eat blood. All right, another one of the 7 Noahide laws is don't eat something that's still kicking. All right, don't eat an animal with life still in it. Not only the blood, but it still has life force in it. It's still alive. All right, so you shouldn't, cut off its leg while it's still squirming. You should first kill it, and then you can eat it. Okay, so that's part of the Noahide laws. It also is against fornication. One is about adjudication, so various judgments, and I'm forgetting one. But so these 7 Noahide laws, the basic idea is that if you are a son of Noah, and you are, okay, because Noah and his 3 sons repopulated, them and their wives, of course, repopulated the entire earth, all living creatures, people, everybody died. And these 8 people that are the only ones to repopulate the earth. So therefore, you are a son or daughter of Noah. And so these, according to the rabbis, according to this idea, these are the basic things that you ought to be doing. And I think they're good. I think they're good. I don't think that we see all of them, really specifically in the text, but I think it's fair to infer these from the text. Certainly, you shouldn't murder, right? That's definitely one. That's pretty obvious, and you shouldn't eat the blood. That's another one that's really obvious. And so those are inferences from the text. Now, what's happening is that there was something written by Rambam in the Middle Ages. So Rambam was a medieval rabbi, and he wrote a book called Malachim u Milchamot. So Malachim is kings, Milchamot are wars, and he wrote this this treatise suggesting probably about what will happen when Messiah comes. All right, so when Messiah comes, these are some of the laws that will be enacted. Now, he was a minority voice. He had a minority opinion. And what's happening is there are people who have taken his suggestion that in the Messianic days that would be in the future, that would be enforced by Messiah, that those ideas of somebody might be beheaded, that is something that the rabbis are trying to kind of foist upon humanity here and now. And I think that's nonsense. And I think it's really just anti-Semitism, or it's just ignorance. But again, it seems like it's catching, unfortunately, and a lot of people are getting swept up in this. But this is another fad. It's going to pass. It'll probably cause some damage, some hurt feelings, maybe some anti-Semitism in the meantime. But in probably a year or 2 or 3, this will just be another fad that's come and gone. It will have amounted to nothing. So I would suggest that people understand what the Noahide laws are. They're not a bunch of rabbis who are trying to get these things passed so they can then lop your head off as a fulfillment of end times prophecy. That's just not the case. We're not told who will be doing the lopping off of heads other than the Antichrist and the false prophet and their system. But to suggest that it's somehow related to the Talmud or things like that, it's just not the case. We really have to we've got to do more research. So here somebody says, beware of the Noahide laws. Why? There's nothing wrong with the Noahide laws. Go research them. You'll see that they're just inferences from Genesis chapter 9. I would say beware of people who are making a big deal about the Noahide laws because it is another scare tactic. It's nothing is going to come of this. I know some of the people who are pushing this idea. I do not agree with them, and I do not think it's based in good scholarship. So that's my thought about that. And but you guys can take your own perspective. All right, Deanna, do pets go to heaven with us? Well, that's a great question, Deanna. We are not told in Scripture. Wouldn't it be nice if Fido could go to heaven? Now, there's nothing that says that they do, and there's nothing that says that they don't. We do know from the book of Ecclesiastes that God says that He takes the spirits back. So once our spirits, that is, all right. So we're definitely told that He takes our spirits back. We're not necessarily told what He does with the spirits of the animals. The suggestion would be that their life force simply just dissipates and it goes back into the ground, and that's the end of it. But we're not really told specifically. We're not told specifically what is going to happen. Now, some clues that we can look at, as we saw already in Genesis chapter. Let's see here. Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, it says, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. All right. So it says, Vayihi Hadam lenefesh chaya. Now it's interesting that the lenefesh chaya, that God says that man became a nefesh chaya. All right. That's very similar language to what we have to the animals. Okay. The word chaya, it means something that is alive. Now, the word for animals is chayot, so that's the plural of chaya, and that this is just a same word. All right, so now, can we get a whole doctrine out of this thing? I don't think so. All right, but it's enough to say we have a clue. What in Hebrew we call a remez. We at least have a clue that maybe there's something that would suggest that animals have more longevity than maybe we at first thought. Okay, but we just don't know. It's really hard to say, what's going to happen to the animals. But we just don't know. So it says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 25, Vayas Elohim et chayat haaretz, okay? And God made the beast of the earth, chaya, right? That's the same word that Adam became, a nefesh chaya. We're also told that animals have a nefesh, that they have, we have that same thing. In fact, if we go back to verse 24, God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing and the beasts of the earth, each according to its kind, and it was so. So in the Hebrew, Vayom Elohim Totzeh Haaretz Nefesh Chaya. Wow. So now the earth is going to bring forth the Nefesh Chaya. That's the same thing that Adam became, was a Nefesh Chaya. So could it be that maybe animals have a soul, or something that goes on beyond death? Well, we can guess, we can speculate, maybe. Okay, it's fun to think so. But we can't really prove it. We do see a correlation. Does that prove causation? I don't know. Now, another thing to keep in mind is in, let's see here, Isaiah chapter 65, and we're looking here in, let's see here. Okay, in Isaiah 65, verse 25, we're told, the wolf and the lamb shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox, and dust shall be the serpent's food. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountains, says the Lord. So here we have insight into the fact that there will be animals in the age to come. All right, we have this also in Isaiah chapter 11. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and the little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young ones shall lie down together, the lion shall eat straw like the ox. So we have a number of different animals that are represented. If we have this many, I think we could presume that there's the whole gamut of animals. Are these animals that died and came back? We don't know. Are these animals that are brand new? We don't know. Okay, we just don't know what to think if these are resurrected animals or if these are new born animals. Not told. We're just not told. But there would definitely be animals in heaven. And, who knows? Maybe God can take the life essence of Fido, your favorite dog, and he can stick it into a dog with, a new body or something. I don't know. I mean, I'm speculating. But I don't think there's any reason to assume that animals cannot be part of the new creation. They definitely will be part of it. Whether it will be your dog that you lost or your cat or whatever, hard to say. Of course, that would raise an interesting question. What about all the chickens that we ate? Do they all come back? I don't know. I mean, that's a lot of chickens. Do they come back as genetically modified chickens? I don't know that either. So maybe it's better if they don't come back as they were. Maybe it's better if God just, he brings back Fido for you, but not all of them en masse. So fun question, but we don't know. Okay, so here we go. We have some more questions. All right, taking a look here. Okay, Cole asked an interesting question. Is it possible, based on Genesis 1:20 and 24, that animals are a product of evolution, not man, but animals? That's a great question, Cole. I really I appreciate the thought that you put into that. I've kind of asked myself that same question, and let me just say this: I don't believe in mindless evolution, as Charles Darwin and others would suggest, that we went from the goo to the zoo to you, and that through a series of fortuitous accidents, here we are. Okay, I certainly don't believe that, and I don't believe that all of the animals evolved one from the other. But what is interesting about Genesis chapter 1, verse 20, God said, let the waters abound with abundance of living creatures. Let the birds fly across the earth, across the face of the firmament of the heavens. All right, so we see that God. It says specifically, God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which waters abounded. So God clearly is the source of the creation. But as to the means, the how He did it, it's very, very general. Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures. So could there be some kind of evolutionary process? What does the word evolution even mean? It just means change. Okay, that's all it means, is to change. When we think of biological evolution, there's generally a sense of there's a slow, gradual change. But interestingly, there's something called the Cambrian explosion, and the idea is that, well, we had animals that were just slowly, slowly, slowly evolving. One amoeba into the next one, and then something like, I forget, what was it, 100 million years ago or something, you had this boom, right? This Cambrian explosion, right? And suddenly there's all these animals of every different kind, and we don't know how that they all just showed up at once, but there it was, right? Well, boy, it sure sounds like the Bible to me. It sounds like God said, "Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens." Right? It sounds exactly what the Cambrian explosion is basically saying. So Darwinian atheistic evolution cannot allow us to spend too much time on this Cambrian explosion, because it kind of ruins their whole narrative that, over hundreds of millions of years, slowly, 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 one thing slowly evolved into another until here we are. All right. The evidence does not support that. But on the other hand, the Bible does not give an exact detail of how everything came about. And could it have been that there maybe there were some some changes, some micro evolution. We say micro evolution, that there were small changes that we still see today, right? We still see the Galapagos Islands. We see the finches that Darwin so studiously observed, and he made some good observations that the beak of the finches changed over time, and then they changed back. Right, that's also interesting. So God did build into the system of our biology that our bodies can adapt. There can be small changes, but we never go from being, a frog to a horse, right? That's where you have a real disconnect. That's where I would absolutely disagree with the idea of evolution, but that there may have been small changes within species, and again, by species, I would really say that let's say more kinds. Okay, so let's talk about the dog kind, or maybe the wolf kind. Okay, dogs and wolves are the same kind, even though we call them different species, and they are, but they're still the same kind. There's different. They're horse. We have the horse kind, but there are different species within the horses, so that they don't all look the same. They're not all the same size, but they're all the same basic body type. Cats, right? Same basic body type. So there's one kind, presumably one kind of cat, but there has been speciation within that kind, and so maybe God allowed that to happen. And the language of Genesis 1:20 and 1:24, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing and beasts of the earth, each according to its kind. And it was so. Again, I don't think that we could rule out that possibility. But again, we never have frogs turning into horses, right? That's what evolution would suggest, is that frogs eventually turned into horses. And that's where I think evolution utterly fails. And the Bible really comes out shining, not surprisingly. All right. Let me see here. Oh, wow. We have been at this for a while. I think I'm going to take about 2 more questions, guys. And then I'm going to encourage you to copy and paste your question and save it till next time, because I'm getting a little bit tired. I love doing this. It's really a lot of fun. It gives me a lot of joy to do this. But eventually my batteries wear out. So Cole asks, let's see here. He asks another question. He says, could it be argued based on First Peter that a day could mean 1,000 years? We're told we are told not to be ignorant of this fact. Maybe I'm missing that, so I'm going to skip to the next one. Okay, this is from Randall. Doug, if 2 people are in covenant and married, will they remain married in the millennium? There's a situation in the New Testament where the Sadducees asked Yeshua about a woman being married multiple times. Well, yeah, based on that, so the Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection. They were trying to trick Jesus, to trap him, and say there was this woman who was married, her husband died, and then because of the Levirate law, where the next of kin, the brother, is supposed to marry this woman, he married her, he died. And the next brother, until all 7 brothers married her. So whose wife is she going to be in the age to come? And Jesus very adeptly answers that you don't understand really much of anything here. You don't understand the power of God, and you don't understand the age to come. So let me just pull up that passage. And let's see here. I'm kind of blanking on where that is. But let's see. Let me just look it up really quick. Okay, so Luke 20:29, there we go. So, teacher, Moses wrote to us that if a man's brother dies, having a wife, and he dies without children, his brother should take his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers, and the first took a wife and died without children. The second took her as his wife, and he died childless, and the third took her, and in like manner the 7. Also, they left no children and died. Last of all, the woman died also. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife does she become? For all 7 had her as wife. Again, this is Luke 20, starting at verse 29. Jesus answered and said to them, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. All right, so that's it, right? In this age, if you want to have kids, better do it now, right? Because you're not going to be doing it in the age to come. The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are counted worthy to attain that age and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. So if you have a wonderful marriage today, praise the Lord, right? Enjoy it. If you have a lousy marriage, you're not going to be bound forever. Okay, so either way, this is the time to be married. This is the time to enjoy your marriage. Um, to have your children is in this age. In the age to come, those who are counted worthy to attain that age and the resurrection from the dead. That's very important that he said, and the resurrection from the dead, because we're told in Isaiah chapter 65 that people will be having kids. All right, we'll go to that in just a moment. But let's continue on here in Luke 20, verse 36. Nor can they die anymore, for they are equal to the angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. All right, so those people who will not be getting married anymore, why won't they be getting married? Because they won't die. Why won't they die? Because they will be equal to the angels and they're sons of God. They're not angels. You don't turn into an angel, but you have the same composition as an angel. And so there will not be any kid rearing in that age. But we also see in Isaiah 65, there we're told that God says in verse 20, 65:20, no more shall an infant from there live but a few days, nor an old man who has not fulfilled his days, for the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. So death is still possible. Babies are still going to be had, okay? It says, they shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For as the days of a tree, so shall be the days of my people. And my elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain, nor bring forth children for trouble. For they shall be the descendants of the blessed of the Lord, and their offspring with them. It shall come to pass that before they call, I will answer, and while they are still speaking, I will hear. Okay, and we're told that the wolf and the lamb shall feed together, the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and dust shall be the serpent's food. All right, and based on this concept, we're told that a little child shall put his hand in the viper's den. Right, the nursing child shall play by the crow's hole. We also see that in this is Isaiah chapter 11. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, etc. And the little child shall lead them. So they're going to be little kids in the age to come. Now, part of the trouble is understanding the concept of the millennium. The millennium is a period of time. It's called the millennium. That's a term that we came up with, but it is a time of 1,000 years. We see that number repeated 6 times in Revelation chapter 20. And I've debated people who don't believe in a millennium. They say, oh, that's just a figurative time. I don't know. When you say a number 6 times, I'm likely to believe the number. And I just don't see where numbers in the Bible are not taken as literal numbers. So they say, well, God's the God of a cattle of 1,000 hills. Well, he is, right? It doesn't say that he's not also the God of the cattle on 10,000 hills, right? But he is indeed the God of the cattle on 1,000 hills. That's a very true statement to 1,000. It doesn't say 1,000 and only 1,000, right? It doesn't say that. It just says he's a God of the cattle on 1,000 hills, and that's a true statement. So, so there will be children that will be born during this time, and we then turn to Revelation 22. In Revelation 22, it says, he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of its street and on either side of the river was a tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Wow. So there's going to be this tree, the tree of life. It's on either side. So it's maybe one tree with interconnected root system, possibly. But in any event, the tree of life will be there. It's on both sides of the river. And the leaves are for the healing of the nations. That's echoed in Ezekiel 47. And the leaves will be for medicine for the nations. Okay, so the leaves will be for medicine for the nations. Well, who needs medicine? Who needs to be healed? The nations apparently do. This is why they need to take the tree of life, because they're not healed, which would suggest that death is still possible, which is what we just read in Isaiah chapter 65. Death is still possible. So there's going to be really three groups of people when Jesus comes back. There'll be those who took the mark, they're toast. Okay, they're gone. They're going to join Satan in his destiny, which is the lake of fire. We have those who are firm believers in Jesus, in Revelation chapter 12, those who keep the commandments and the testimony of Jesus Christ, right? Those two who have keep the commandments and the testimony of Jesus Christ, those people will get their new bodies. As far as I can tell, they will be the people who will be in the resurrection, right? So either they'll be transformed, but they'll not precede those who were asleep. So those who are asleep in the Lord and those who will be transformed at the Lord's return. So they'll get their new bodies. They will be those people who were counted worthy to attain to that age and the resurrection of the dead that Jesus was talking about in Luke chapter 20. And then there's one more group of people, and this will be a group of people who are to some degree righteous. They're not perfect, okay, but they don't have the testimony of Jesus. Right, so they're kind of the Romans chapter 2 people who don't have the Torah, they don't have the testimony of Jesus, but they do the things that are required in the Torah so that it becomes a Torah unto itself. And these people will then get to enter into the millennium age as flesh and blood. They will have babies, and then those babies will have babies, etc. And then there will be this final rebellion. We see that in Revelation chapter 20. So after the 1,000 years, we see that Satan has been put into the abyss. For 1,000 years, he's been bound in that place. And it says, and he cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal on him so that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished. But after these things, he must be released for a little while. I've calculated it to be 1 year. I won't get into that now. But so he's going to come back, and it says in verse 7, now when the 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. They went up on the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. Wow. So here you have it. We're going to have lots and lots of people who are still flesh and blood, who for some reason are going to refuse to enjoy the beauty and the bounty of what God has for them. We're told in Revelation 22 concerning those who are outside the gates. It says, blessed are those who do his commandments. Another version says those who wash their garments, either way, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city. That's Revelation 22:14. So again, people will be mortal. The way that they transform from being mortal to being immortal, from having that mortal fleshly body to getting that body that is analogous to the angels, is they have to take of the river of life per Zechariah chapter 13 verse 1, and Ezekiel chapter 47, Revelation 22. And so they take of the river of life, and then they'll have the right to take of the tree of life. And when they do, they'll be transformed. They will be transformed. They'll get their new body. And it says, and they may enter through the gates into the city. But notice who's outside the gates. But outside are dogs and sorcerers and sexually immoral and murderers and idolaters and whoever loves and practices a lie. So there will still be people outside the New Jerusalem who for some reason will say, I don't want to take that. I don't want to be part of it. By the way, all this is going to be put into the movie trilogy that I am making. So please keep that in prayer. I really do appreciate that. But all these details are amazing, and I'm going to squeeze them in one way or the other. So with that, guys, I'm going to have to stop. It's been a lot of fun. My battery is wearing out here, so my battery. Keep your questions till next time. I'm going to really just keep taking lots and lots of questions. They're a lot of fun, and we can carry this on next time. If you want me to answer your question early, I would encourage you to get on to this session early, and so make sure that you have subscribed, you've clicked on the button, and as soon as you see that come on, make sure to get your question in there, and I'll answer it in the order that it comes in. So it's been a lot of fun. I wish I could take all the questions, but I'm just running out of energy here. So God bless you guys. It's been a lot of fun, and stay in the Word. Remember, we're having a conference this July, so if you could come and join us, it'd be wonderful. oneinmessiahconvocation.com. You can get all the information there, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So God bless you. Till next time. God bless.